At my son's custody hearing, my wife's lawyer addressed the judge, "My client's husband is an unfit father." The courtroom was silent except for the faint sound of papers being shuffled across polished wooden desks. Every eye seemed to be fixed on the judge, but mine never left my 6-year-old son. He sat beside a court-appointed counselor, swinging his legs nervously beneath the chair, too young to understand why the two people he loved most were standing on opposite sides of the room. I wanted to smile at him, to let him know everything would be okay, but I wasn't even sure I believed those words myself. The judge entered, and everyone stood. My heart pounded so loudly that I could barely hear the clerk announce the case. This wasn't just another hearing. It was the day that would determine whether I would continue waking my son up for school, helping him with homework, reading bedtime stories, and watching him grow into the man I hoped he would become. Everything I loved was hanging by a thread. My wife sat across from me, avoiding eye contact. We had once promised to spend our lives together. We had dreamed about buying our first home, raising children, celebrating birthdays, and growing old side by side. But somewhere along the way, those dreams disappeared. What remained was anger, misunderstanding, and years of silence that eventually led us to this courtroom. Her attorney stood confidently, adjusting his tie before addressing the judge. "Your Honor," he began, "my client believes her husband is an unfit father." Those words hit me harder than I expected. An unfit father? I had prepared myself for accusations about our marriage. I expected criticism about arguments, financial struggles, and personal differences. But hearing someone question my love for my son felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with both hands. The lawyer continued listing examples that painted a picture of someone I hardly recognized. He claimed I worked too many hours. He claimed I missed important family events. He claimed I placed my career above my child. He claimed my home wasn't suitable for raising a young boy. Each sentence sounded convincing to anyone who didn't know the truth. But I knew the truth. Yes, I worked overtime. Not because I wanted expensive cars or luxury vacations. I worked because every extra hour meant another payment toward medical bills after my wife experienced complications during childbirth. I worked because our mortgage didn't pay itself. I worked because I wanted my son to grow up without worrying about food, clothing, or a safe place to sleep. Every missed birthday party came with guilt. Every late night at the office came with a promise that someday things would become easier. No one in that courtroom knew how many nights I sat in my car outside our house after work, exhausted, gathering enough strength to walk inside with a smile because I didn't want my son to see how tired I really was. The lawyer wasn't finished. He displayed printed text messages, photographs, bank statements, calendar records. Piece by piece, he tried to build a story where I appeared distant, uncaring, and emotionally unavailable. I glanced toward my wife. She still refused to look at me. That hurt almost as much as the accusations themselves. Then my attorney quietly placed a folder in front of me. "Stay calm," he whispered. "We've prepared for this." I nodded, although my hands continued shaking. The judge listened carefully without interrupting. When the lawyer finally sat down, the courtroom fell silent once again. Then my attorney stood. He didn't immediately argue. Instead, he walked toward the evidence table carrying a thick binder. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "there is another side to this story." He opened the binder. Inside were hundreds of photographs. There was my son learning to ride a bicycle while I ran beside him. Another showed us building a science project together at the kitchen table. Another captured us camping beneath a sky full of stars. Another showed me sleeping in a hospital chair beside him after he broke his arm. Every picture represented a moment no one else had mentioned. Then my attorney presented school attendance records, teacher evaluations, medical documents, letters from neighbors, statements from my son's soccer coach. Each one described the same thing. A father who never stopped showing up. A father who volunteered during school events whenever work allowed. A father who attended parent-teacher conferences. A father who coached Little League practices. A father who spent weekends teaching his son honesty, kindness, and responsibility. The judge carefully examined every document. For the first time that morning, I noticed my wife's confidence beginning to fade. My attorney wasn't trying to make her look like a bad mother. Instead, he focused on one simple question. What truly serves the best interests of this child? That question changed everything. Because custody cases aren't supposed to be about revenge. They're supposed to be about children. The courtroom remained completely still. Then my attorney played several short home videos. The first showed my son laughing while we baked cookies together. The second captured us building a treehouse over several weekends. The third showed him wrapping his tiny arms around my neck after scoring his first soccer goal. "You came, Dad," he shouted in the video. "You promised." The recording ended. No one spoke. Even the judge watched quietly. Those weren't staged moments. They were ordinary memories. The kind that cannot be manufactured for a courtroom. The kind created by years of love. I finally looked toward my wife. For the first time that day, our eyes met. She looked away almost immediately. I couldn't tell whether she felt regret, sadness, or simply exhaustion. Perhaps all three. Then something unexpected happened. The court-appointed child psychologist requested permission to speak. She explained that she had spent several weeks interviewing our son separately from both parents. She asked him simple questions. Who helps with homework? Who comforts you when you're scared? Who makes you laugh? Who listens when you're sad? According to her report, he never treated us like opponents. He simply described having two parents he loved in different ways. Then she shared one sentence that brought tears to my eyes. When I asked him what he wanted most, she said, he answered, "I just want Mom and Dad to stop fighting because I love them both." Those words echoed through the courtroom. No lawyer could argue against the honesty of a child. No legal strategy could erase the pain hidden inside that simple wish. For the first time since the hearing began, I realized this wasn't about winning. It was about protecting the little boy sitting quietly only a few feet away, waiting for the adults in his life to remember that he was the reason we were all there. The courtroom remained completely silent after the child psychologist finished speaking. Even the lawyers seemed to understand that no legal argument could carry more weight than the honest words of a 6-year-old child. My son had unknowingly reminded everyone why we were there in the first place. This case was never supposed to be about proving who was the better person. It was supposed to be about protecting a little boy who deserved to grow up surrounded by love instead of conflict. The judge thanked the psychologist before turning toward both attorneys. "I have reviewed many custody cases over the years," he said calmly. "But I always remind parents that children are not prizes to be won. They are human beings who need stability, love, and honesty." Those words filled the room with a heavy silence. My wife's attorney quickly stood again, determined not to lose momentum. He presented another stack of documents, including emails and work schedules that showed I had spent countless nights away from home over the past several years. "Your Honor," he argued, "these records clearly demonstrate that the father prioritized his career over his family." I lowered my head for a moment. On paper, it certainly looked that way. There were months when I worked 60 or even 70 hours every week. There were holidays when I arrived home after everyone had gone to bed. There were birthdays where I barely made it before the candles were blown out. But paper never tells the whole story. My attorney asked permission to cross-examine. He walked toward the witness stand and calmly addressed my wife's attorney. "Would you also agree," he asked, "that during those same years, my client was the family's primary financial provider?" The attorney hesitated. "Yes." "And would you agree that the mortgage, health insurance, medical bills, school tuition, and household expenses were primarily paid from his income? Again, the answer was yes. And are you aware that during this same period, my client declined several promotions because they required relocating hundreds of miles away from his son? The courtroom became noticeably quieter. The attorney admitted he had not reviewed those employment records. My lawyer smiled politely before handing copies to the judge. The documents showed that I had been offered higher-paying positions in 3 different states. Every offer would have dramatically increased my salary. Every one of them had been declined. The reason written in each email was nearly identical. I cannot relocate because remaining close to my son is my highest priority. I had almost forgotten writing those words years earlier. Now they had become some of the strongest evidence in my favor. The judge slowly read every page. Then another witness entered the courtroom. It was my son's first-grade teacher. She smiled kindly before taking the oath. My attorney asked only one question. In your professional opinion, what kind of father is the man sitting here today? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her folder and removed several drawings made by my son throughout the school year. Children often draw the people who matter most to them. One picture showed the 3 of us standing together in front of our home. Another showed me teaching him to ride his bicycle. One drawing caught everyone's attention. It showed me sitting beside his bed reading a bedtime story. Above the picture, written in uneven handwriting, were 5 simple words. My dad makes me brave. I felt tears forming before I could stop them. The teacher looked toward the judge. My students often write about their heroes, she explained. Many choose athletes or superheroes. He always writes about his father. No one spoke. The teacher continued. He has never described his father as frightening, neglectful, or absent. He consistently describes him as patient, encouraging, and loving. After she stepped down, another witness entered. It was our next-door neighbor. He had lived beside us for nearly 9 years. He testified that he frequently saw me playing basketball with my son in the driveway, helping him learn to ride his bike, mowing the lawn together, and spending weekends building birdhouses. Then he smiled. The loudest sound on our street every Saturday morning, he said, wasn't construction. It was laughter. Several people in the courtroom smiled for the first time that day. But the most unexpected witness had yet to appear. My attorney called my former supervisor. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 2 years. He walked confidently to the witness stand. Did your employee work long hours? My attorney asked. Absolutely. Did he ever explain why? Every chance he got. The supervisor looked directly at the judge. He constantly asked for flexible schedules so he could attend school plays, doctor appointments, and soccer games. If overtime was required, he usually volunteered for overnight shifts so he could still spend afternoons with his son. He paused before adding one final sentence. I've supervised hundreds of employees during my career. He's one of the few who regularly turned down promotions because being a father mattered more than having a bigger office. Those words stayed with me. I never imagined anyone had noticed. The judge thanked the witness. Then something completely unexpected happened. My wife's attorney quietly whispered something to her. She nodded slowly. After several seconds, she stood. Your Honor, she said softly, may I address the court directly? Permission was granted. She walked toward the center of the courtroom. For the first time since the hearing began, she looked directly into my eyes. Her voice trembled. When we separated, she began, I was angry. She stopped for a moment to steady herself. I believed that if he had spent more time at home, maybe our marriage could have been saved. Tears rolled down her face. But somewhere along the way, I allowed my anger toward my husband to become confused with his role as a father. The courtroom became completely still. She wiped her eyes. He wasn't a perfect husband. She looked at me again. But he has always loved our son. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. She continued speaking. I don't want my son growing up believing he has to choose between his parents. He deserves both of us. Even her own attorney looked surprised. Then she turned toward the judge. I still believe shared custody is in our son's best interest. For several seconds, no one spoke. I felt years of resentment beginning to disappear. Not because our marriage could be repaired. I knew that chapter had ended. But because the woman standing across from me had finally separated our failed relationship from my relationship with our child. The judge leaned back in his chair, quietly reviewing every piece of evidence presented throughout the day. The final decision was only moments away. I glanced toward my son. He looked frightened, confused, and exhausted. When our eyes met, I smiled. This time, he smiled back. No matter what happened next, I silently promised myself that I would never allow another courtroom to become the place where my son learned what love looked like. The judge remained silent for what felt like an eternity. He carefully reviewed every document, every photograph, every witness statement, and every note taken throughout the hearing. No one in the courtroom dared to speak. The only sound was the slow turning of pages as he organized the evidence one final time. My son looked back and forth between his mother and me, unaware that the next few minutes would shape the rest of his childhood. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that no matter what happened, would continue fighting to be the father he deserved. Finally, the judge removed his glasses and looked directly at both of us. Custody cases are among the most difficult decisions this court must make, he began. There are no perfect parents. Every mother and every father has flaws. The question before this court is not which parent is perfect, but which arrangement best serves the child's future. He paused before continuing. Throughout today's hearing, I have heard painful accusations, emotional testimony, and compelling evidence. I have also listened carefully to the independent professionals assigned to this case. He turned toward the child psychologist's report. The most powerful voice in this courtroom belongs to the little boy sitting here today. He has consistently expressed love for both of his parents. He does not wish to lose either one. The judge looked at my wife. You have acknowledged that your husband has always loved your son. Then he looked at me. And you have demonstrated through years of actions, not merely words, that your son's well-being has remained your highest priority. The courtroom remained silent. It is therefore the decision of this court that both parents shall share legal custody. The child will spend significant and meaningful time with both his mother and his father. Major decisions regarding his education, healthcare, and future shall be made together. For a moment, I couldn't process what I had heard. Then relief washed over me. I wasn't losing my son. I wasn't being erased from his life. I would still be there for birthdays, school performances, soccer games, graduations, and every milestone that mattered. My wife quietly closed her eyes as tears rolled down her cheeks. They were no longer tears of anger. They were tears of relief. The judge wasn't finished. I also strongly encourage both parents to participate in co-parenting counseling. Children thrive when parents cooperate, even after a marriage ends. Your son deserves peace, not ongoing conflict. We both nodded. As the hearing ended, people slowly began leaving the courtroom. Lawyers packed their files, witnesses exchanged quiet conversations, and the courtroom that had been filled with tension only moments earlier gradually emptied. Then I heard a small voice. "Dad." I turned around. My son had walked toward me with uncertain steps. I knelt down, opened my arms, and before I could say a single word, he wrapped his little arms tightly around my neck. "I thought they were going to take you away," he whispered. I hugged him even tighter. "No, buddy," I said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." He smiled through his tears. Can we still build the treehouse this weekend? I laughed for the first time in months. Absolutely. My wife stood only a few feet away, watching us. After a long moment, she walked over. I never wanted him to feel like this, she said quietly. I know, I replied. We stood there in silence. Not as husband and wife. Not as enemies. But as two parents who finally understood that our son needed both of us more than either of us needed to win. Over the following months, life slowly began to change. Co-parenting wasn't always easy. There were disagreements about schedules, holidays, school events, and routines. But whenever emotions threatened to take over, we remembered that day in court. We remembered the words our son had spoken to the psychologist. I just want mom and dad to stop fighting. Those simple words became our guide. We attended school events together without arguing. We celebrated birthdays as one family. We sat side by side at soccer matches, cheering for the same little boy. Instead of competing for his affection, we worked together to give him the happiest childhood possible. Years passed. The frightened little 6-year-old grew into a confident young man. On the day he graduated from high school, he invited both of us to stand beside him for family photographs. As the photographer prepared to take the picture, my son smiled. I wouldn't be here without both of you. That single sentence made every difficult conversation, every compromise, and every painful memory worthwhile. Looking back now, I realize the custody hearing wasn't the day I nearly lost my son. It was the day I learned what being a father truly meant. Being a father isn't measured by the number of hours you work, the size of your paycheck, or even the mistakes you make along the way. It's measured by your willingness to show up, to keep your promises, to put your child's needs above your own pride, and to love without conditions. Families don't have to be perfect to be strong. Sometimes they simply need adults who are willing to choose forgiveness over resentment and cooperation over conflict. If there's one lesson I hope every parent takes from our story, it's this: children are always watching. They remember not only the arguments but also the apologies. They notice not only the pain but also the healing. The greatest gift a parent can give is not winning against the other parent, it's giving a child the freedom to love both. That day in court, everyone expected a battle. Instead, my son unknowingly became the teacher. His innocence reminded every adult in the room that love is never divided by sharing it. In fact, the more love a child receives, the stronger and more confident that child becomes. Today, whenever someone asks me about the hardest day of my life, I don't remember the accusations or the fear. I remember a little boy who believed his parents could still do the right thing. And because of him, we finally did. If this story touched your heart, remember that every child deserves love, respect, and the presence of parents who place their happiness above personal conflict. Sometimes the greatest courtroom victory isn't winning a case, it's saving a family from a lifetime of unnecessary pain.